What's going on, interwebs? Now, if you need to replace the bolts that your lug nuts attached to, this is the video for you. Okay, so what ended up happening, I decided to replace the rear bushings on my Mustang. The ones that it had were original from stock, so they were like completely worn out, you know, ready for a swap. No biggie, easy job. And unfortunately, when I was putting my rear wheels back on, I snapped off 2 bolts or 2 studs, just like this. Man, and I tell you, the defeat was so real. It was just everything was going so well until those bolts just snapped off. And that's because I was following the specs. S197 Mustangs, torque is set to 100 pounds-feet of torque for the lug nuts. So now I'm gonna film this and show you guys how you can do this at your house with the same tools you use to take down your wheel and brake calipers. Simple fix. So yeah, defeat still. Okay, as for the hardware I had to buy, here are the replacement studs that I bought at my local AutoZone. As you can see, quite similar to the ones I snapped off. Also, I went ahead and grabbed some lug nuts that are open-ended, so I can visually see how much more torquing I need to do on the stud to fully set it in. So that's helpful. And the studs were like, let's say $3 a pop, and the studs as well, like $2-3 a pop. So in all, I spent like less than $10 for this replacement. So again, not bad. And as I mentioned earlier, this is why I needed a 20M compared to my 21 stock lug nut. As you can see, the stock lug nut requires a 21 socket, but these open-ended lug nuts apparently require a 20. Just a thing to know, because I didn't notice that in the beginning, and I almost stripped one of my lug nuts because I was just using the 21. So pay attention, guys. And lastly, one final detail to make sure you guys note is that the studs that I removed from my Mustang has this notch on one side of the stud, and this notch is so that the stud can actually get in there and not bind up with the gear that the ABS sensor uses. So in my case, my aftermarket studs didn't come with that notch, so I had to use my handy dandy grinder to grind a notch on the aftermarket studs, and I was able to fit them in, no problem. So if you have these following tools handy, you can definitely swap out a pair of studs. So alright guys, so there you have it. So as you can see, completely snapped off. All right, so once wheel has been removed, next step is to remove the brake caliper, and that's just done with 2 bolts, one right here and another same bolt over there at the bottom. If you haven't messed with them forever, an impact wrench will work perfectly. If not, a simple hand wrench should do the trick. And once the brake caliper is off, then the brake disc is gonna come off. Then we'll have a better picture of these studs. All right, so the brake caliper bolts are a 15 mil, and then I have this fancy attachment, this angle adjustment to help with tight quarters. Alright, so that just slides right off. Just balance it up now. Just put this over here. Whew. Goes on. Okay, with the brake disc now off, we can now see this component a lot better, and we can now see the back part of it. So now all that's left is to hammer this piece out, and it should pop out, you know, after a good amount of strikes. But is that easy? You know, just slap it with a hammer and get your new bolt and slide it through. In this case, this Ford Mustang has this little cutout right here that can send the stud through and have it reach its destination right here, at which point it'd be like loosely set. But what I ended up doing to help cement the stud in place is I used 2 brake discs as spacers, and then just used the lug nut to tighten and set in this bolt. So I don't know if that makes sense, but you'll see in a bit what I'm talking about. Also, doesn't hurt to have some rust blaster or penetrating catalyst fluid to make sure, or to help your case in getting these unstuck. Angle, bro. Gotta get that angle. And just like that. Bam, baby. There it is. So now, as you can see, the bolt or stud, you know, is able to reach its appropriate place. Now, before we can work on mounting this bolt, we're gonna have to modify it a bit. And by modifying, we're just gonna have to grind out a notch. As I mentioned earlier, the ones that come with the Mustang have this notch on them, and the reason they have this notch on them is because there is this gear right here that comes in the way of allowing the bolt to pass fully through. So notching the bolt like this allows it to just flushly evade that gearing system that the ABS uses, and this is what will let you go fully through and on to the next step. All right, so as you can see, I already started making a little notch right there, and I'm just gonna make it a little bit more flatter so it's like right onto that next edge. Check. Woo. Then I'm just checking if, I'm just trying to match the notch on these guys. Ooh, right there. Almost there. This one needs a little bit more. All right, so as you can see, now I have this notch on one side, and it should be more than enough to allow me to get through that gear. All right, so you should just be able to barely see that I have enough space to get this stud through. So now that you have that notch, you should be good. Now, I don't know if any other aftermarket studs account for that. I would just, if you have the chance to get those, I'd just go with those. But you can still do it with a grinder yourself. So up next is to lube your bolt and get ready for the pressing. And this will be done by using 2 brake discs and a lug nut. All right, so what you're gonna do next is place the brake disc back on right there. So you're gonna take the other brake disc and you're gonna place it inverted now. So these 2 brake discs are gonna act as spacers, so I can use my lug nuts as a torquing tool to have the stud pressed in from like that inside cavity, if that makes any sense. So now with the 2 brake discs on, you can see that the new bolt is able to show itself and show some threads. This is what you want because we'll be using a lug nut to attach to those threads and slowly torque in the stud into its slotted position. Now again, I'm using open-ended lug nuts for this because the factory capped ones only allow certain length of it to go in. So if you're doing something like this is handy, so you could gauge how much more depth you have on your bolt. You'll see later what I mean about that. Okay, open-ended lug nuts have been hand cranked into position. I will now start by slowly applying pressure onto the control lug nuts. Once I feel the brakes are firmly in place, I'll start applying pressure to the new stud. Okay, at this point, the new stud is looking like it made good progress. End of the stud looking more flush with the end of the lug nut. Now, if we take a look at the back, I don't know if you can tell. Get flashlight. The top of the stud is now near the end of the gear. I'm gonna give it a couple more torques, see how much it can go in this stage. And after you feel like you hit the limit in terms of torquing, we'll take this off and put the wheel back on and finish the torquing with the wheel. Alright guys, so bolts are already set in as tight as they're gonna get. Now we can focus on tightening the new studs. And as I mentioned earlier, this is where the open-ended lug nuts come in handy, because if you could tell, here is a control lug nut with a stud, and it has a certain amount of depth extruding from the lug nut. So that's going to be our reference point to indicate to us when we can stop, or when we reached a good point for the new stud. Once we reach a length that's similar to our control, we're going to take this off and visually inspect the stud in the back just to make sure that it's indeed sitting nice and flush against the disc. Okay guys, I believe I have torqued the new stud in a good amount, that it's already set in fairly flush. Here is the new stud, and if you can see, just by eye glance, it looks like the same depth is sticking out with the control. So now's a good time to take this off and visually inspect and make sure that the stud is indeed flush. Okay y'all, I can confirm to you that this new stud is now indeed flush on the backside. It's just a big pain to show you guys, but it's indeed flush, and as you can tell, it's now sitting flush along the other studs. Woo! So we are done. We can finally put the wheels back on, and that's how you swap your wheel studs. Again, something you can do yourself, so I figured I'd share. So just make sure you torque your lug nuts to the specifications in your vehicle. So yeah guys, there you have it. That's how you can swap out your wheel studs on your own. It's essentially with the same tools you use to take off your wheel and brake calipers, so why not? Only difference in this install, as you saw, was me grinding up a notch so the stud can go through. Other than that, you guys should be good. Take it easy, stay wild.